You're tuned in to True Crime Stories.
The interrogation that sent Debra Milke to Arizona's death row lasted about 30 minutes. It was not recorded. There were no witnesses. There was no signed statement. There was no second officer in the room. When it ended, the detective walked out and wrote a report saying she had confessed to arranging the death of her 4-year-old son. That report, one man's account of what one woman said behind a closed door, would be the entire case against her. It would hold for 22 years. Debra Milke was 25 in 1989. She had divorced her husband the year before and was raising their son, Christopher Conan Milke, on her own in Phoenix, Arizona. She worked at an insurance agency and shared an apartment with a family acquaintance named James Stiers. On the morning of December 2nd, 1989, Stiers offered to take Christopher to the Metro Center Mall to see Santa Claus. Christopher put on his favorite outfit. He left with Stiers. He never came home. Stiers returned hours later, claiming Christopher had wandered off in the food court. Police and volunteers searched. Debra Milke filed a missing child report and went on local television asking for help. Within 72 hours, investigators had built a different theory. Stiers and a friend named Roger Scott had been together that day. Scott was interviewed for more than 14 hours. He eventually led detectives to a wash north of the city, where Christopher was found. The child had suffered 3 fatal wounds to the head. That should have been the end of the story for Debra Milke. She was not at the scene. Both men later agreed she was not physically present. But Scott, in his lengthy interrogation, told detectives that Stiers had said Milke wanted it done. That was the entire link. A statement by one suspect about something a second suspect had supposedly said about what a third person, Debra, had supposedly wanted. It was enough to bring her in. She was driven to the Pinal County Sheriff's Office. The detective assigned to interview her was a Phoenix homicide investigator named Armando Saldate Jr. She was placed in a small room with him. The door closed. The recorder was not turned on. Saldate emerged from that room and, 3 days later, filed a written report describing a full confession. He wrote that Milke had admitted ordering Christopher's death because she did not want to raise him and did not want him to live with his father. The state would later argue she had also wanted to collect on a small life insurance policy. There was nothing else. No recording, no notes signed by Milke, no witness in the room, no corroborating statement from either of the 2 men actually charged with carrying out the act, both of whom declined to testify against her. At trial in October 1990, Milke took the stand and said she had never confessed. Saldate took the stand and said she had. The jury believed the detective. Milke was convicted and, in January 1991, sentenced to die. Stiers and Scott were tried separately and also sent to death row. To this day, the 2 men have implicated each other as the person who actually pulled the trigger. Milke went to Perryville Prison. For 18 years, her appeals went nowhere. The Arizona courts treated Saldate's account as settled fact. And then, slowly, something began to surface that the original jury had never been told. Armando Saldate had a file, a long one. In 1973, he had been suspended after pulling over a female motorist and, in the language of the department's own findings, taking liberties with her, then arranging to meet her later. Across the years, judges in at least 4 separate criminal cases had thrown out confessions Saldate obtained because he had violated suspects' constitutional rights during questioning. In 4 additional cases, courts had found that Saul Date either lied under oath or that the confessions he produced could not be trusted. None of this was ever turned over to Milke's defense team. The jury that voted to sentence her to die had been told they were hearing from a veteran homicide detective. They were not told they were hearing from a witness with a documented history of fabricating what suspects said. In March of 2013, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit overturned Milke's conviction. The opinion, written by Chief Judge Alex Kozinski, called the prosecution's failure to disclose Saul Date's record a severe stain on the Arizona justice system. It pointed out that Saul Date's testimony about the unrecorded confession was the only direct evidence linking Milke to the crime. Without it, there was no case. The state did not give up. The Arizona Attorney General's office announced it would retry her and seek the death penalty again. Milke was released on bond in September 2013. Then, in December of that year, the courts ruled that Saul Date could invoke his Fifth Amendment right and refuse to testify at any retrial, meaning the state's star witness would not take the stand a second time. In December 2014, an Arizona appeals court ordered the charges dismissed, ruling that retrying her would amount to double jeopardy given the egregious prosecutorial misconduct that produced the first conviction. On March 23, 2015, 25 years, 3 months, and 14 days after Christopher's death, all charges were formally dropped. The case is unusual, not for what was hidden, but for how little was ever there to begin with. A 4-year-old child was taken into the desert. 2 men were convicted of carrying it out and remain on death row. But the woman the state called the mastermind was convicted on a single piece of evidence: one detective's memory of one unrecorded conversation. And that detective had a documented history, sealed inside his own personnel file, of producing confessions that judges refused to believe. The system that put Debra Milke on death row did not lack rules. It had Brady disclosure obligations. It had appellate review. What it lacked was anyone willing to apply those rules to a confession that, on paper, looked clean. Milke later sued the city of Phoenix. That civil case was dismissed in 2020 after a federal judge ruled she had destroyed too many of her own records during litigation. A ruling that ended her chance at compensation, but did not disturb the underlying finding that her criminal conviction had been unconstitutional. She has never received $1 for the 22 years she spent on death row. The 2 men convicted of carrying out the act remain incarcerated. Detective Saul Date retired. He was never charged. The question worth sitting with is this one. If a confession is the entire case, and the confession was never recorded, and the only person who heard it had a file full of reasons not to be trusted, how does that case ever reach a jury in the first place? What does it tell you about the rest of the cases that detective worked, the ones that never got a Ninth Circuit panel to look twice? Leave a comment with what you think should have stopped this case before it got to trial. And if this is the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. There are more like it than anyone is comfortable admitting.